Bransfield!
You know Bethesda, the studio that does Todd Howard's Jackets, that never gives up on initially underwhelming MMOs, that made more ports of Skyrim than there are cells in your body. Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Starfield, that one. Well, the company started out as a bit of a two-trick pony when it came to game development, focusing on two areas you might not expect, especially given one of them isn't Skyrim. Sports titles and tie-ins with the movie about everyone's favourite time-travelling killer robots of doom, Apex. No, got mixed up there. The Terminator. Bethesda did a bunch of Terminator games in the 90s is what I mean. In fact, from 1991 to 1996, Bethesda developed 5 Terminator games as well as publishing one other. In that same time frame, Bethesda developed 9 sports titles, but I just don't want to focus on that. And contrary to my usual approach in videos, I don't want to focus on every Terminator game Bethesda was involved in, at least not today. Maybe that'll be a listy video for another day. No, today I wanted to focus on a particular couple of Termy titles Bethesda made and how they revolutionized the entire first-person shooter genre. Actually, let's just stop beating around any bushes. It's mouselook. Free look, the ability to move where you're looking and aiming in a first-person game by using the mouse. That's what I'm focusing on here. This was something that had been in a bunch of games already. Bethesda did not invent the concept, nor even perfect it. It was absolutely the way things were heading anyway. Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss, and System Shock had proto-mouselook implementations, while Raven's FPS Cyclones had something of an interstitial version of what the feature would become. But what mouselook would become became a feature in another game not made by Bethesda. It's widely accepted, and who am I to argue, that Bungie's 1994 FPS Marathon was the first game to implement mouselook as we know and love it today. You moved with the keyboard, you looked and aimed with the mouse, and all was well in the world. So what in the blue hell did Bethesda do to, as I, Bransfield, hero of this story, stated earlier, revolutionize first-person shooters? Well, let's load up 1995's Terminator Future Shock for PC and have a shufty. See that? Let's go through it again, see if those who missed out can pick up on it. The 2 sweetest words in the English language, default. Where Marathon required the player to make the change themselves in the options menu, Future Shock just dropped you into things with mouselook on as standard and just expected you to get on with it. It was something of a surprise for people at the time, with some critics showing hesitancy, even confusion, at a control scheme that asked you to simultaneously use 2 different input devices. Suddenly you weren't using the mouse to careen around levels holding the right button to run forward and generally making a goof of yourself. Now the mouse was controlling your head. But it made sense. It was the right decision for this to be the default way of doing things. History has confirmed that for us. It was the gentle nudge we all needed to help embrace our fate, of which there is none except for what Bethesda makes for us, apparently. Now, Future Shock defaulting to mouselook was and is my intended focus in this video. The thing I wanted to highlight is that revolutionary feature. But the fun thing here is Bethesda's game actually incorporated a bunch of other elements that, frankly, were mind-blowing in 1995. Where plenty of first-person shooters in 1995 were content to ride Doom's coattails, Future Shock layered plenty on top of the basic run-and-gun format. It mixed things up, offering standard on-foot sections in the most part, but peppering in vehicular sections too. When it came to presentation, the player was dropped into a fully 3D polygonal world that stood out from the majority of contemporary titles. And that world was one you were, within limitations, free to explore as you see fit, rather than the constricted corridors or ever so slightly more open arenas of Doom and its countless clones. Safe to say Future Shock wasn't your basic movie tie-in. This was a game made with true ambition and effort behind it. Bethesda was trying to make something special with a license it had a clear fondness for, and the devs weren't content with just following the crowd when it came to doing the popular stuff in a mid-90s FPS. It is fair to point out, again, just as with mouselook, Future Shock wasn't the first game to feature such elements. Other games, Bethesda's own Terminator games, had already ticked some of the same boxes years earlier. But elements like these being brought together in such a straightforward fashion, with the bare minimum of clunkiness, it all blending together so naturally, made for an overall package that should have been a huge indication of where the FPS genre was heading. It was, fittingly, a glimpse into the future. But just because that glimpse is offered, and regardless of how accurate a future it might portray, the simple fact is if people aren't paying enough attention, you're not going to achieve the level of impact you likely should have. Case in point, there are plenty of valid arguments around the impact of different features in different games, and I think it's fair to say that Future Shock wasn't the game to make mouselook a thing with players. It just wasn't popular enough. Duke Nukem 3D had a pop in 1996, but really it was Quake that made this particular control method the only proper way to play an FPS. But even id's legendary shooter didn't actually feature mouselook by default, at least not in the beginning, with the first release of Quake requiring mouselook to be toggled on by holding down a button, the default being mouse 3, your scroll wheel button, or by fiddling with console commands. It's a similar point in how history shows 1997's Treasures of the Deep was the first FPS to feature modern twin-stick inputs on a single controller, and 2000's Alien Resurrection was the first FPS to implement those controls by default. But it was 2001's Halo that had the most impact on spreading the good word of what we now take for granted with our console shooters. It's a similar enough point that it might be worth another dedicated video now I think of it, but that's for another time. So Terminator Future Shock, a pioneering game for its implementation of mouselook by default, as well as for its blending of on-foot and in-vehicle mechanics, its fully 3D presentation, its early days not an RPG but here's a sort of open world anyway approach, a game that quietly revolutionized what we should expect from the first-person shooter genre. And a game that didn't actually have quite the impact on things it should have. Not because of lacking quality, not because it wasn't wrapped around a well-known enough name, but because, in the end, it just didn't see that mainstream breakthrough that you need to make a feature the new de facto standard. Is this lack of major success why Future Shock and its follow-up / glorified add-on pack Skynet have largely been consigned to the history books? Maybe. The games are highlighted and rightly praised periodically by folks around the YouTubes and other places, but there's never any sniff of a proper re-release through GOG or Steam, and certainly no remake on the horizon. Even the fan-made solutions are limited, with Future Shock 32 the only really viable option these days, after a Unity port of the games was touted back in 2020 before going entirely dark. It's a dark fate for a couple of games that were, somewhat fittingly given the setting, ahead of their time. For those wondering, Google and DOSBox are your friend when it comes to actually playing them today, and there is a fan-made patch to get both Future Shock and Skynet playing a bit more nicely in the modern era. But from a mainstream perspective, from the sorts of thought processes that lead developers and publishers to actually make the decision to return to titles from their past, one of the most revolutionary FPS duos in gaming history is going to remain completely terminated. Thanks for watching, and special thanks to my supporters who help keep me motivated in this endless quest to make videos about stuff. You can join them on Patreon or through YouTube memberships with the links below. I'm off to figure out why it is you cry. The answer is because of trying to figure out DOSBox settings. Bye! Okay Google, how do you pronounce interstitial?